It's a remarkable statistic. 75% of Americans oppose the ban on gays serving in the military. This is according to a new ABC News Washington Post poll. The U.S. Congress has certainly noticed the shift in opinion. Last week, a subcommittee of the House of Representatives held hearings on the issue for the first time in 15 years. The primary question was this: in a time of stop-loss orders and recruitment shortfalls, are there good reasons to keep gays and lesbians from serving their country?
Do we want to have a sexualized atmosphere in our armed forces?
On the one side, you had Elaine Donnelly, founder and president of the Center for Military Readiness. Her focus was sex.
I'm talking about the infantry, special operations forces, Navy SEALs, cramped submarines.
On the other side, decorated veterans who happen to be gay. Their talking points centering on service.
I realized that I had fought and nearly died to secure the rights for others that I myself was not free to enjoy.
Eric Alva was the first American service member wounded in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He lost a leg.
I had proudly served a country that was not proud of me.
But in the battle of sound bites, Donnelly dropped some real bombshells.
What would you say to Cynthia Yost, the woman who on a training exercise was assaulted by a group of lesbians?
Donnelly warned members of the House Subcommittee on Military Personnel that typical gay behavior has its consequences.
Only a year ago in the Minneapolis airport, the nation was appalled to find that there were 39 men over a period of 3 months, and one of them, U.S. Senator, who was found to be engaging in what I would call passive-aggressive behavior, something that sexualizes the atmosphere and makes it difficult for everybody else.
As far as the 24 countries that allow gays to serve?
If we follow the example of the British military, they are now looking at the issue of transgenders in the military.
Many committee members found these arguments appalling.
Ms. Donnelly, I have a question, and you may not want to answer, but when did you decide to become a heterosexual?
In essence, you're basically asserting that straight men and women in our military aren't professional enough to serve openly with gay troops while successfully completing their military mission. You know, as a former Army officer, I could tell you I think that's an insult to me and to many of the soldiers.
Other arguments they found downright ridiculous.
You need to think about this issue of HIV positivity. We have troops who are not deployable because of HIV positive status.
I think the bringing up of HIV is so inappropriate. By this analysis, you know what we ought to do? We ought to recruit only lesbians for the military.
Committee members who support the ban on gays had little to say in response to Joan Dara, who during her 29 years of service to the Navy was always in fear that her relationship would be discovered.
She wouldn't even dare to call me at work.
Right.
If there were any kind of an emergency, she'd get a male coworker to call me. And you're right, if I slipped up and said my partner and I went to the movies, I'd be fired.
The only witness who served in the military that supported Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a former member of Army Special Ops.
And we've got to huddle together to stay warm and keep from freezing in the night. There can't be any arousal.
But which side aroused the most sympathy from lawmakers? Well, that seemed obvious.
I may be straight, but I'm not narrow.
So those hearings were held last Wednesday. Lots of talk on the issue of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But when will there actually be some action on this issue? Joining me now from Washington, a lobbyist for the Human Rights Campaign, David Stacy. David, you were there in the hearing. You were there to hear Elaine Donnelly, your opponent she's with the Center for Military Readiness. Now, she didn't get a great reception from the Democrats on that committee, and even some Republicans were unimpressed with her testimony. What's her story?
Well, Elaine Donnelly is a longtime activist against gays in the military, but also against women in the military. So she had some provocative testimony. She tends to focus a lot on sex and assault and things like that, really not relevant to this debate.
Right now, 75% of Americans, according to the most recent polling, oppose the ban on gays in the military, believe that gays should be allowed to serve in the military. You've got a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate. What's the problem? How come Congress is not abolishing the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy?
You know, the position of the Pentagon is critically important and what the military itself wants to do. And, you know, they've not been supportive of changing the policy in 1993 or since then. This hearing was a first step towards ultimate repeal of the policy. You know, we're going to need a president that wants to do it, which we don't have now.
I mean, whose minds as a lobbyist do you need to change at this point to change the law if that's going to happen?
Well, I think the people on the subcommittee are very well versed in this topic, so in a sense, we weren't speaking to them, we were speaking to the American public.
What's next? You've had this hearing. What's going to happen legislatively? I know that there's a bill that's been introduced, but what's going to happen with it? It's going to die with this Congress.
Well, we're going to continue to build the number of co-sponsors on the Military Readiness Enhancement Act, which would repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell and allow open service in the military. And that will be reintroduced early next year. Hopefully we'll have a president that wants to repeal the policy, and we will work with the president on a timeline to have Congress consider that. We hope next year, perhaps the year after that. You know, we have to pass it through both houses of Congress and get it signed, and that's something that we are going to work very hard to get done.
All right. David Stacey with the Human Rights Campaign, thanks so much for joining us from Washington.
Thank you, Jason.